Welcome to this edition of Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Service. Today, join us as special guest Terry Hibbets and us discuss butterflies and dragonflies. Hope you enjoy. Good morning, everyone, and welcome with Birding with Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension for this edition of Cup Chat. And today we have special guest Terry Hibbets joining us to talk about beyond the birds as we look at dragonflies and butterflies. So, Terry, tell us a little bit maybe about your background. And we know that you're a Birding with Extension team member. You serve as a birding buddy for multiple years with Birding with Extension, so we're glad to have you on. But give us a little bit about your background, Terry.
Well, I was raised in a family that enjoyed the outdoors, and anything that I could do outside was something great. It's just something that I really enjoyed doing with my parents and with my brothers. And so I started out at a fairly young age. Had an older brother that was going to TCU taking a field biology class, and he was collecting insects for this class, and he got me started collecting insects. So I think that kind of got me started. Then I went into reptiles and amphibians, and then I started looking at birds a little bit. And I didn't start dragonflies until 2008. But anyway, so it's just something that I've always enjoyed, everything outside and doing things that require a little bit of knowledge. And I was one of those that always wanted to know why or what was this, what was that, and start looking up information about these things that I was finding, and that got me started and branching out into many different areas. So anyway,
we know that you like birds, herbs, butterflies, and dragonflies. So we know you are a very diverse naturalist. So speaking of that, why would a birder want to expand their knowledge and try to, become a butterflyer or an odonator? I mean, not really sure that those are words, but Maureen made them up. So technically no one's allowed to me this morning. But why would you kind of transition or add butterflies and dragonflies to your list when you're a birder?
We always looked at it this way, that birding was usually early morning thing. You start out at sunrise and you bird until the birds kind of calm down, and then the dragonflies start flying. And so it was just something it was a natural progression. And same with butterflies, they start flying a little bit later in the morning when the sun comes out and warms up the earth, and they start flying. And so if you wanted to continue to do something outside and instead of go back to bed, we would start looking at other critters. And so that was one of the things. And we always did reptiles, especially snakes, at night, and you chase them at night, and you do birds early in the morning, and you can do butterflies and dragonflies during the daytime. And so that's just, kind of a logical progression. But,
gotcha. So you can be outside all day if you do all of them.
Yeah, of course you wear yourself out, but
yes,
there might be a nap at some point.
Snack time and lunch, all of the above.
Snack time, yes, exactly.
If you are joining us today, comment, let us know where you are joining from. We'd love to know who is watching with us this morning. So, do you need any other tools? So like with birding, you typically carry a binoculars, field guide, if it's on your phone. What kind of tools do we need to go butterflying?
The same tools. Okay, the same tools you use for birding. Close focusing binoculars are really handy. If you see a dragonfly or a damselfly or a butterfly in a distance and you can't really tell what it is, you look at it through the binoculars, and then you decide if it's something you want to try to sneak up on, or what I'd say, kind of hunt. You target that animal and you try to go in after it and then you pull out your same equipment that you use for your birds, good camera that has a telescoping lens like this one, or a lot of people now are going to those bridge cameras that like the 65X Canon that they have in Olympus, that are real lightweight and easy to use. Once you learn how to focus them properly, they're really good. And I saw a lot of the birders on our birding extension trip, or birding the border, that you were using those small cameras and were getting excellent photographs from them. So whatever you're comfortable in using, you just keep using the same camera that you were using for birding. And so it transitions very easily from taking pictures of birds down to taking pictures of dragonflies. We even got Brian hooked on that a little bit down in South Texas one trip. And he's taking pictures of dragonflies just with us too.
It's kind of funny you mentioned with,
equipment.
It's kind of funny thinking with the binoculars though. The first time that I looked at a butterfly through my binoculars, I think as birders, you very much think of the binoculars as being, farther away, things. And of course, not that I haven't looked through birds that are up close, not that I haven't looked through binoculars at birds that are up close, but just butterflies can be even closer, and you still might want to use, you what?
I said you would have to, because you're blind.
Well, that's true. I do. But it's just kind of funny to look at something that's so close. And so one tip that I would say that I learned pretty quick when, I guess it was last year, Emily, when you and Brian and I were scouting in May, and we were looking at some butterflies at the below the dam area, was get very comfortable with which direction, like when you're focusing your binoculars, which direction do you turn the knob to go close and far? Because actually It was when we were in, for the Rio Grande Festival, we were all looking at some sort of butterfly down close because our guide knew his butterflies too. And so we're all looking down close, and then a quail ran across the road up ahead of us, and none of us were fast enough to get your binoculars up to the quail and refocus. And so that's the thing. I think sometimes when you're a birder, you're obviously going to keep birding. And I mean, that was a bunch of experienced birders. It wasn't just me. Nobody could get theirs focused quickly enough as the quail ran across the road to get a positive ID on the quail. It was probably a bobwhite based on where we were, but it stood to me like a scaled quail, which would have been rare, but nobody could confirm what it was. So anyhow, that's my tip, is make sure you can focus your binoculars fast enough. And I think it's kind of funny too that you describe hunting the butterfly and kind of sneaking up on it. I feel like I want to see this.
Well,
but it's fun.
Around and easing towards them. I think that would be a funny kind of video.
The term really is stalking, and that skipped my mind, missed my mind a while ago. But when you stalk an animal, whether you're hunting it, for meat or whatever, but if you're stalking it to get a better view of it or a better photograph, that's what I usually use for my terms there, stalking. But anyway, yeah.
It's funny, I always end up telling the youth when we do youth birding, I'm always saying, use the binoculars to get close, not your feet to get close, because kids see the bird and they want to, just go up to it, and then the bird's gone. And so I say, use your binoculars to get close. And it's really kind of the same with butterflies, although I don't know, I feel like why can we get closer to butterflies? Can they not see us as well as a bird can? What is butterfly vision like?
I think butterflies are just not as wary. There are some that are skippers, for example, are very difficult to get really good photographs of because they're so flighty. They'll land and jump here and jump here and jump here on the flower, and when you approach them, they'll move very quickly. Whereas the larger butterflies a lot of times will land and stay put long enough for you to get a good look at them. But dragonflies are tough too because they don't want to sit in one spot if there's movement going on. Their eyes are unbelievable. But I don't know if y'all realize this, but dragonflies are the number one predator on capture and of prey of any predator on this earth. So they have over 90% kill rate. whereas most predators don't. And so
I did not know that.
Their vision is so spread out that they can see and realize what's going on. I had a little dragonfly one time fly around my legs and catch mosquitoes. And he would go land and eat the mosquito, come back with my legs and fly around and catch another mosquito and go sit down and eat it and then come back. And it was fun to watch him because every time he went after a mosquito, he caught one. And that's not true with, like a hawk or some of these other predators.
That's awesome. I didn't know that capture rates of dragonfly hunting had been studied, but that's so cool. And it does bring up another important point for our listeners in case they didn't know that dragonflies are a fantastic predator of mosquitoes. So if you don't like mosquitoes, then you should love dragonflies because dragonflies eat lots of mosquitoes.
Well, and let's kind of, I had a thought, dang it, and it's going to go away. It's, I guess, mornings.
I have a different thought while you're thinking of your thought. Okay. My other thought, I had not thought about this before, but with birds, one of the things we talk about with ID is behavior. Is that yours, Emily?
No, but I remember now. Dang it. You can share today.
I can keep going. Okay, thanks. And so it's kind of interesting. I feel like with the insects, we don't always pay attention, to the behavior of different insect species, but it sounds like from what you're saying, skippers, even as, a fairly big group of butterflies, have a certain behavior of how they fly and how they land. Are there kind of some of those behaviors for different butterflies and dragonflies?
With insects as with birds have their particular habits and their behavior. And once you get acquainted with those behavior habits, then more better how to find them and how to search for them. And same way with the insects, butterflies like certain flowers, they like certain plants, they like certain time of day, they like, it's very similar to birds. And dragonflies especially, you have certain dragonflies that feed on the wing. They don't land very often. So you got to really pay attention to those critters to find out where they're going to be and where they're going to land, where you can get photographs of them, unless you're a really good photographer and can catch them in flight, which is difficult, very difficult. But anyway, yes, the behavior is very important. Certain ones like streams, certain ones like slow moving streams, faster moving streams, some like ponds, some like marshes, swamps, cypress bogs. So you got they're specialists in certain places. So once you learn that, then you can go out and find those animals that you're searching for.
So what about? Okay, we can't obviously catch birds. I mean, obviously people can catch birds, but with misnets, and so that's a big ordeal. What is the policy or procedures if you wanted to catch a dragonfly or butterfly? Is that a no-no while butterflying and dragonflying?
It depends on where you're at. If you're in a park, it's a no-no. You don't capture anything in a park unless you get a permit. I know some of the parks will allow permits for collecting if there is certain research that's needed on certain species, but the insect people are a little bit more lax on collecting than others because, really an insect's going to live just a few months, or not even a few months, a few weeks, and then they die as an adult. And so capturing a few of those really doesn't make much difference because they're going to die in a few weeks anyway. But a lot of times we'll capture one if there's one that flies, it's consistently flies, and you can't get a decent photograph of it. You can catch it, cool it down a little bit, take pictures of it. When it warms up, it flies away. I'm not one of the ones that like to capture them very often. There are some that do add to collections, at universities and so forth. But I like to get the photographs of them and let them go. And so that's one thing, that's that's me. And most of the guys I run around with are that way too. So.
Gotcha. Completely understand. Maureen, any other thoughts before I move on to my next question? Before my next thought? Okay.
Nope. You're good.
So let's talk a little bit about identification. So one thing that we talk about birders and being a birder, we talk about bird ID a lot. Understanding the parts of the bird, understanding those color patterns, those shapes, those sizes. We make that case for ID. See how I did that, Maureen? I tied in our tagline. Making
You did that.
for
It was
ID.
good. It was good.
And so how is that different, or is it not different than looking at identification of butterflies and dragonflies?
Back at the turn of the century, the 2000, 2001, 2002, whatever, there was only one book out on dragonflies and damselflies. There were a few on butterflies, but there was only one really decent book out. And then John Abbott started working at UT, and he came out with a couple of books. These are, let me get them a little closer here. These are put out for UT Press. One is on dragonflies, and this one's on damselflies. And these came out, and then now there's books after book after book after book on dragonflies. As a matter of fact, certain states will have their own dragonfly book. Like these are Texas, and if the serious dragonfly people will have several of those books. Then there's a guy up in the Northwest, his name is Dennis Paulson, that has written 2 books, one on the East, one on the West, of all of the dragonflies in the United States. So this has really become very useful. And then there's the same thing like birds. There's sites on the computer where you can go to and look at certain people's images that they have produced and view those. I've got a website that has probably 500 different species of dragonflies on it. So there's several people that like that, and so it's much easier now to identify them than it used to be. And then there's groups.
Okay, so now I have the big question for all of our listeners out there that don't know. What is the difference between a damselfly and a dragonfly?
I want to hear what Terry says, but then I have a fun way to remember it.
Normally, most often, dragonflies will land. When they land, they have their wings out. They have their wings out, and sometimes they'll set them back a little bit or forward a little bit, but they're spread out. A damselfly, when it lands, folds its wings up behind its back. There's a few exceptions to that, but most of them fold their wings behind their back. Then another thing is their eyes. The damselfly eyes are separated apart from one another, and there's a gap in between the two set of eyes, whereas dragonflies' eyes either touch or almost touch, and they're much bigger for the body than that.
They are technically 2 different species?
Well, different species.
No, 2 different. Help me here.
Like dragonflies versus damselflies are different at what level of classification?
Yeah.
Are they different?
They're basically, if you're in Europe, they're all dragonflies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're in Europe, they say they're all dragonflies. You just have different varieties of those. And damselflies are usually smaller. They're more fragile, I guess. They flitter around a little bit more than a dragonfly is more direct in its movement and its flight. And damselflies are more kind of flighty. They bounce around and jump around. It's not as straightforward flying. Now, as a predator, they're just as aggressive. The larvae are very, very aggressive, and I think Alien was taken after a dragonfly larvae. The movie Alien, the mouth part that comes out like this and grabs the prey, because that's the way damselfly larvae do. But anyway, they're superficially quite a bit different in small parts, small things, but not over the whole big picture. They're very, very similar. But. I don't
Okay,
know.
so I want to
what do you think,
share.
Maureen?
Well,
What do
I
you
want to
think,
share.
Maureen?
Well, I just want to share how I teach like kids to remember the dragonfly
Okay.
versus damselfly thing. And also, I have to say, now I have an idea for a whole nother beyond birds topic to talk about like aquatic insects because
Right.
as Terry said, these larvae are they're aquatic, and so you've got dragonfly larvae and damselfly larvae that you can find in a pond, and they are ferocious. I mean, if you get
Yeah.
a big enough dragonfly larvae and a small enough tadpole, they'll take down a tadpole or a small fish, like
Or a
no
small
big deal.
fish.
No big deal. Anyhow, so the thing I like to say for dragonflies versus damselflies is exactly based on, like you were saying, holding their wings. Dragonflies hold theirs out like a dragon that's hunting, so it's like very ominous, like I'm going to get you because I'm a dragonfly. And a damselfly, just they do look more dainty. And so if you think of a damsel, like a damsel in distress, being ladylike, and she'd have her legs crossed. Now they don't cross their wings, they just put them together. But you can think about sitting ladylike and putting your wings like this as opposed to like on the hunt. That's how I remember dragonflies versus damselflies.
Yeah.
Aren't you cute?
Yeah, there's some damselflies that are called spread wings, and they will not fold them behind their back, but they'll hold them backwards a little bit, kind of angle backwards, so that they're still a damselfly, but there's a few of those out there too, but
Yeah.
they're easy
Well,
to distinguish.
Now, can we distinguish males versus females like we can birds with their color patterns and things like that?
Yes,
We
yes, yes. In most damselflies and dragonflies, the males are the good-looking one,
can. Just like
and the females are more drab. But it's not always the case. The other day, I photographed a damselfly that the female was bright red with a dark stripe down its thorax. Was one of the best-looking damselflies I'd seen. The male is completely different colored though. So yeah, so the color in the dragonflies particularly, now butterflies it's not that way as much, but in dragonflies the males are usually have the showy colors, and they like to show off to the females to attract the females. Then you look at their ovipositors at the very tip of their abdomen, and you got to be a pretty good you got to know your dragonflies very well to be able to use the ovipositors to distinguish them. It takes that'll take some more practice, but the color is pretty right on, and you can see that right away. And then again, you got problems with identification with newly transformed dragonflies that have just crawled out of they call it exuvia after it becomes the shell that comes crawling out on a branch, and they crawl out of it, and then they fold out and become the adult. But when they first come out, they're dull, they're all plain colored, and they're very difficult to distinguish at that age.
So very similar to our juvenile and immature birds.
Right.
I mean,
Some of your
the similarities
yes.
of identification in that respect, that our males are very much more colorful, our females are more drab, and then our immatures and juveniles are terribly,
sometimes they're really hard. Yes.
Really hard to
difficult.
distinguish.
Yeah.
So thoughts, Maureen? Your turn.
Yeah, how about a little bit more about butterflies? So you mentioned that with
yeah.
butterflies, there's not really those color differences. Are they more drab when they hatch out? What are some of the ID things?
Well, there's some distinguishing differences. Usually females are a little bit larger than males, and they some have a few different markings on the lower wing. For example, a monarch, the females are much bigger, and the markings are bigger and broader, and the males smaller with more finely defined markings. And other butterflies are very similar to that. Usually, the female has a larger abdomen, fuller, especially if it's ready to lay eggs. So they are very much more similar to one another, the males, females. Now, there's some species, some of the skippers are completely different. Males and females look different, and that can be difficult. But most of your bigger butterflies, you know it. You know it's a monarch. It's a monarch. It's a, but there are a few subtle differences between the males and females in butterflies, but not as great as it is in damselflies and dragonflies.
Well, I'm going to throw a wrench in the whole
The
discussion.
whole thing here. Okay.
I know. That's why you love me, Terry. Moths.
What about moths?
What about them? And are all the butterflies that we, are all the butterfly looking things butterflies, or that we see outside, or some of those moths?
Some of them are possibly moths. There are some moths that look like butterflies. There are a few butterflies that look like moths. Some of the differences is on their antennae. The antennae of a butterfly is usually straight with very few bristles on them, or none. Moths usually have bristles and are feathery like on their antennae. The moths are, they're just bodies are fatter than the butterflies, but they're hard to distinguish. Some of them are really hard to distinguish apart from one another. I started photographing those things too, and that has been one of the hardest, the most difficult task I've done. It's not the photographs, it's the identification. So they can be a very, very big challenge.
Is there anything you don't do? You are photographing moths, you are a herper, dragonflies, and a birder. I just am not sure. What are you going to add next?
Well, what I do is, what I tell people, this is what I like to do. I like to photograph. So anything that gets in the way of my camera, I take a picture of it. That can be plants, that can be, animals, it can be insects. Another big thing now, people are taking lots of photographs of robber flies. You know what a robber fly is?
I do know what a robber fly is. Why?
Now, you didn't know what they are, but they're a big predator too. And they're so photogenic. And lots of people like to take pictures of robber flies. And another one is the big one is tiger beetles, because they're out and they're active during the day and they're running around on the ground, and people like to try to capture them, and they're different patterns and different colors of those. So, and then there's specialists out there that take pictures of only one thing, just like there's birders that do birds, and that's it, nothing else. And you talk about a plant or anything like that, they just close their mind off, And there's insect people the same way.
And your plants
too. Do what?
And your plants.
Well, I don't know them that well, but I just know the ones that I'm more interested in. But but anyway, it's just something I enjoy. Like I said, I like the outdoors, and I like the things that are out there, and trying to figure out what they are. And that's the big thing right there, is trying to figure out what things are.
Okay, so I have one more question about kind of the identification when we're looking at butterflies or dragonflies. How much variation is there within one species? So, like we see, actually, I saw some really interesting pictures the other day of like a male painted bunting, which, if you get a male painted bunting that looks typical, they're very, distinctive, but it has kind of some different colors mixed in. Or of course, during, when they're molting, non-breeding season, all those things can change the feathers. But of course, with butterflies, we're not talking about, feathers, we're talking about scales. And I feel like there would be more consistency within a species. Is that correct? Or am I just kind of making that up?
That is really difficult. Some species have been separated to the point where you cannot tell them apart except by looking at their reproductive organs. And so in the dragonfly world, there are several in that category that are very difficult. For example, the American ruby spot, that's very, very common up and down our streams down here in Texas, or all over the United States pretty much. Well, they have just separated that out into two species now. There's one that's found along the Rio Grande that they're calling the cryptic ruby spot. You cannot tell the difference between it and a regular ruby spot, except by looking at their ovipositors. And that is very difficult to do unless you get them in your hand. And so there are those kind of issues. And sometimes we'll just say it's either or, especially when you're going to a place like iNaturalist. You're going to post things on iNaturalist and they'll say, okay, we cannot distinguish it from the photographs, so you have to just say either or. And that's the way they are. A lot of them are that way. By the way, before we get out of here, there is a new app for your phone now. It's called OC. It's Odonata Central. This is the big group that deals with dragonflies and damselflies all over the world. And they are starting a program in June where they're going to actually monitor the numbers of dragonflies and damselflies around the world. And so you can post these on OC or iNaturalist. If you post them on iNaturalist, they'll automatically go into OC. If you post them in OC, Odonata Central, they will be listed there. And so I can't remember the dates, but it's in June. And then in the Southern Hemisphere, it's going to be in December. But anyway, this is a first that they're going to do for dragonflies around the world. And we have a bunch of really good people in Texas that are interested in dragonflies. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see the results of this data that's collected. But,
no, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And that was my next question was, as birders, we typically think of eBird and how to record and document and contribute to citizen science. But the new program, I'll let you say the words again because I don't remember. And iNaturalist are great ways to be documenting your dragonflies, your damselflies, and your butterflies.
Yeah, butterflies and they have an e-butterfly. And e-butterfly is also connected to iNaturalist. So anything you put in iNaturalist automatically goes in e-butterfly.
So I guess our recommendation would have to be to go for the iNaturalist, because then it would go to both places.
Yes, it would. It's the easiest to use, I think. And but and they will give you suggestions for IDs. Now they're not always correct. Matter of fact, a lot of times they're not correct. So if you know what you got, put down the name. Don't just go with theirs. But yeah.
Well, that's cool. Well, Stephanie said that program. Stephanie is joining us live, and we all know how much we love Stephanie down in RGV. And I guess she looked up the dates, or she has those committed to memory. But she says June 19th through the 27th is Onanada. Right. And and I guess that's because Stephanie works at the Butterfly Center.
Right.
RGV.
Right.
And so she would be up on her butterflies. We forget about that sometimes. We know we love her as a birder. Forget sometimes that she is a butterflyer too.
Right.
Well, we're going to have to ask her probably to come on and talk to us about that, because I feel like we have just barely scratched the surface. I have so many more questions for Terry, but it's 8:00. I'm also distracted now because we are running out of time, and I'm also distracted because it's like breakfast time, and somebody just walked in the screen behind Emily. One of the county agents was carrying a pack of bacon, so now I'm wondering why I don't have bacon.
And you got these two kids to feed.
I know, and I don't have any bacon for them. So
yes, I am with a bunch of county agents, as y'all can tell, and it is morning, and everybody's up and trying to come get coffee. So I am going to have to duck out a little bit, but it has been super fun, Terry, to kind of go through and talk about butterflies and dragonflies with you. Speaking of which, I hope everyone has noticed Terry's shirt. He is wearing a dragonfly shirt. He may not have brought a cup to Cup Chat, but he has. Oh, he did have a cup. Oh, he does have his cup.
We just kept him talking so much that he didn't get to show his cup.
His is tea.
There you go.
Mine is coffee. I'm back on my Starbucks caramel macchiato creamer. Let's be all real. So I've enjoyed that. So Anyways,
Okay, wait, but so I have to ask, what species are on your shirt?
Well, these are from the worldwide, so there's a lot of them I have no clue what they are,
Oh.
but they are numbered. But Troy got this for me, and but they didn't send a key or a list of what each one was, numbered, and I haven't taken the time to look them all up.
That's funny. All right. Well, everybody comment if you enjoyed Beyond Birds, because we have other things that we can talk about every so often. We won't do it very often. As I mentioned, knowing that Stephanie is down at the International Butterfly Center, we might have to have her come back on and talk more about butterflies, because seriously, I feel like we could talk for hours. I have so many questions and things I'm so interested about with this. So everybody who's watching, comment. So I know we could all be here for a long time. So, but everybody comment if you liked doing Beyond Birds. Let us know, and every so often we'll sprinkle in something Beyond Birds. And I'm going to try to find someone who has like a microscope camera that we could get so we could look at aquatic insects, because that would be so cool. Because seriously, dragonfly larvae are like the most hardcore things ever.
Well, there's some good internet videos of those feeding. So
are there?
Anybody's interested, they can go to the internet and look that up.
Okay, I'm gonna find those.
That would be super cool. Well, it is 8:07. Everybody has to get on with their Wednesday. So happy Cup Chat. Thank you so much, Terry, for joining us. We've super appreciated it. Maureen, thanks for all your awesome thoughts as an addition to. But I won't see you next. Well, maybe. We will see if I will see you next week on Cup Chat. But Maureen will be back with Cup Chat next week. And our guest next week is...
We don't have a guest.
We don't have a guest yet.
Week.
She's working on that one. I didn't know if that was the one you had nailed down or...
No. We don't have a guest. We don't need a guest. I'm the guest.
You're the guest.
I'm teaching the lesson.
So it's just going to be just you on Cup Chat?
Well, I'm going to find somebody else to discuss this with, because I know it's more exciting when there's like a chat. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm just chatting with myself. So that I haven't worked out yet. That guess I have to work out. But I'm teaching.
I thank you guys for what y'all do. Y'all are much appreciated in this part of the country and this part of the state. And I really want to thank y'all for what y'all do.
Oh, thank you, Terry. That's so sweet.
Thank you, Terry.
We love you.
We appreciate you too. Yeah. So we put our volunteers to a lot of hard work. So thank you for putting up with us.
We do. We do always. But anyways, thank y'all everyone for joining us, and happy Wednesday. We will see y'all next week, or we won't see you next week on Cup Chat. Maureen will see you next week on Cup Chat. I will be out at Rio Diablo birding camp, and we will have all of our kids out birding. So I don't know that I will be able to jump on. All right. Have a good Wednesday, guys.
Hold on.
Bye.
Got to turn off.